Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is your host, Kushalmehra. All right, today's discussion is on crypto. So, I've been wanting to cover this topic for a while. I've been reading about cryptocurrencies or blockchain or the technology, whether in general, and I was always intrigued by it. So, there are views that are pro cryptocurrency, there are views that are anti cryptocurrency. Some say crypto is X, some say crypto is Y, and I was really intrigued by all the discussion surrounding it. So I reached out to Rajeev and I told him, Rajeev, let's talk about it. And Rajeev said, let's have a discussion where a couple of people are involved. So, Rajeev said, let's get Gautam in too. So, Gautam and Rajeev, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Kushal. Thank you for having me.
All right. So Gautam, I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind. So first of all, Gautam, I'll request you to tell everybody on the podcast a bit about yourself too. And let's start like this, Gautam. Why don't you give all of us some sort of a crypto 101, if you could?
Sure. My name is Gautam Chhugani. I work for Sanford Bernstein. I head financial services and financial technology for Bernstein. My crypto journey started in 2017. Crypto as an investment class, I think one of the most interesting aspects about crypto has been for me, obviously, a big part that this is a decentralized ledger and it controls and it tells you how much money you have. This is nothing but simply a decentralized ledger where there's somebody kind of controlling who owns how.
All right, Rajeev, I think there's some issue with Gautam's audio. So let me come to you then while I deal with Gautam and his audio issue. So Rajeev, let's start with this. So let's start with the Indian perspective then. Now, if you look at it in the last, I would say the 2-year period, there is a lot of back and forth when it comes to cryptocurrency, where there was discussion in the Indian, I would say, Indian parliamentary level that we were going to look to. I think the news was that India is looking to completely stop or ban cryptocurrencies altogether. Then there were some articles written, and now the finance ministry has taken a few things back, and they've kind of said, we will consider this in a different angle. But I think the finance minister had also made some statements. So if I was to ask you, Rajeev, from an Indian perspective, what is the issue with cryptocurrency in India? Where do you think things are as of now?
Sorry, yeah. So some of the problems or challenges, Kushal, that are there with crypto assets and cryptocurrencies in India are sort of generic to all governments. And that goes back to control over issue of currencies. Obviously, that's been a sovereign sort of privilege, and no sovereign is willing to see that privilege. Now, if something like Bitcoin comes along and it is perceived or it is seen as a privately issued currency, that is something which every state in the world, every sovereign in the world is going to push back against, so that is the kind of general issue with Bitcoin in particular, not necessarily all cryptocurrencies, but Bitcoin especially, because Bitcoin is seen increasingly as a store of value. Some of the other ones you could argue are more like financial assets, or they have other kinds of applications that can be built on them, like Ethereum can be used for that, for example. But Bitcoin is being seen nowadays as a store of value and as a currency. So that's the kind of general issue with all sort of crypto assets. The second issue comes specifically with India, and that is because we don't have an open capital account. So without having an open capital account, something like cryptocurrencies enable transfer of money beyond what the Indian government permits. So currently for individuals, that limit on how much money can be transferred by them outside India is $250,000 per person per year. So could something like crypto assets be used to circumvent that? Yes, that's possible, and maybe it is happening. So which is why the regulatory sort of agencies in India, whether it's RBI and others, they are looking at it very seriously as to whether this is to be permitted. And there was talk of even a complete ban on cryptocurrencies I think it was last year or earlier this year. And the second issue, I think, which is peculiar to India, is generally speaking, I think in India people tend to, the first reaction to something that is new or hard to understand, hard to explain in terms of technology, the first reaction is to push back against it completely instead of thinking about how this can be used. And it's no different with something like crypto. This is really novel technology, and the reaction of the government has been, very, very, very. They've been very sort of suspicious as to whether they should be allowed or not. But props to them that after that ban was suggested, and then people in the sort of blockchain community, technologists and investors of different stripes, people made a noise about it that this would be harmful. And then the latest news is that the government has said they're going to constitute a committee to decide what to do. Maybe a complete ban is not necessary.
All right. So now that we have Gautam back with us, Gautam, now you can go for it and give us a crypto 101.
Sorry, I don't know where I got cut off last time. I mean, as you know, as Rajeev was saying, Bitcoin is simply a store of value. To kind of make it simple for the audience, you kind of compare it to digital gold. The reason it's compared to gold is because of its finite supply, which is the Bitcoin algorithm kind of keeps the supply finite at 21 million Bitcoins. And as more and more people adopt this as a store of value, there's a kind of, in some ways, there is kind of rising demand and sort of finite supply, and that's what sort of brings in the digital scarcity, or sort of gives Bitcoin value. Now, it doesn't mean that it all goes up in a straight line. We've seen multiple cycles in Bitcoin where the demand tends to be fairly emotional and sentimental, driven by factors such as government bans or an important personality not saying good things about Bitcoin, which kind of impacts adoption in the short run. But over a period of time, most people who understand Bitcoin have realized that if you hold it for a fairly long period of time, the supply and the digital scarcity already automatically takes care of the returns. And hence, anyone who's held Bitcoin for a longer period of time has beaten any other asset class, including gold, and even for that matter, sort of the highest performing equities. And that's what makes Bitcoin interesting. The other part of, so Bitcoin is not the only part of the crypto ecosystem. It has other aspects around it, particularly the fact that there's something called smart contracts. So, think of internet as exchange of information, where you're kind of, internet just made exchange of email, information, messaging, social media, all of that sort of fairly accessible to everyone. In a way, crypto is making exchange of value sort of fairly accessible to anyone. And once you have sort of value or money flowing freely at the speed of information across the internet, you can also program it, which is where smart contracts comes in, particularly smart contract platforms like Ethereum, which is sort of the preeminent smart contract platform, where imagine anyone in India. So usually, you would see that, people would code in Silicon Valley and build these global companies. So Facebook, is a classic example of that. Everyone kind of, Facebook is Facebook for the world, but it was coded in Silicon Valley. Ethereum sort of equalizes that. A person in India could start coding on Ethereum, like a smart contract or a financial application, and it could be used globally across the world. And in fact, in the current crypto cycle, we've realized a couple of Indian startups have actually built platforms for the world. And this would not have been possible without Ethereum, because it allows you to program value or build a smart contract across the globe. Now, what is a smart contract? Just to kind of make it even simpler for the audience, a smart contract is nothing but something which is kind of a programmable logic, like if-then kind of a statement, where if you say X, if X condition is met, then you could, the output could be Y. And so it's kind of an if-then logic that is kind of coded on the internet. But you can now, or you could simply see it as a decentralized computer across the world, where anyone could log onto that computer, be it sort of the Ethereum network, and start coding something. So that's sort of what smart contract is, and that's what sort of equalizes, in my view, innovation in the world, and that's why Ethereum is so important. sort of becoming the second largest currency. Ethereum is nothing but, Ethereum has a native token called ETH or ETH, which is used to pay transaction fees on the Ethereum network, and that's what the Ethereum token does. It's also a way in which the Ethereum network is kept secure by kind of paying that to the miners who keep the sort of Ethereum network sort of secure and keep validating the transactions. So I would say that's roughly the 101. I know there's a lot I said in there, but happy to kind of dive into anything that you'd like to talk about.
So I actually have a question for Rajeev, and maybe Gautam, you can chime in too. So then, Rajeev, if I ask you a question, what is the difference between a global public blockchain and a private permissioned blockchain? So what would be the difference, and why does that difference matter then?
So the analogy Kushal had made, when I was I tweeted about this. I said that imagine the Indian rupee and airline miles, let's say Air Vistara miles. So the Indian rupee would be like a global public blockchain, and your Air Vistara miles would be like a permissioned blockchain or a private blockchain, where when you are let's say if you're buying Air Vistara miles, or if you are dealing with Air Vistara miles, all the control is in the hands of a private player, and they can set the terms and conditions for that. Whereas with the rupee, obviously there's much more freedom, as a currency and as a value transfer sort of instrument. The Indian rupee is far more flexible than miles from the airline. But I mean, you can't pay someone with airline miles, but you can pay someone with rupees. So that in a way is a crude kind of analogy I would make. And the whole magic of blockchains, I think, comes from their kind of public nature, from their global nature. And if you dumb it down to basically an access controlled sort of database, which is what a permissioned blockchain is, then you are essentially just turning it into another database, and then losing the properties that make that so interesting.
All right. So Gautam, what would you say if I was to ask you the same question between the difference between the two?
Yeah, I mean, as Rajeev said, right, the value of if four banks decide to run a blockchain between themselves, there's no value where anyone else can come and build. The whole grassroots movement, global grassroots movement, is what makes public blockchains very interesting. The other important factor on public blockchains is what is called tokenization. So every platform that is launched, imagine a startup that is launched on Ethereum, on a public blockchain like Ethereum, starts up with its own native token. Native token is simply like if tomorrow Uber had to start and run, instead of running on its own servers, wanted to start on the Ethereum blockchain, it would launch Uber token, and everyone could kind of participate in that. The Uber drivers would own the Uber token, the Uber riders would own the Uber token, and that would kind of bring a common skin in the game and bring very interesting incentive mechanisms around how do you kind of improve adoption of Uber across the world. I just kind of used Uber as an example, but this is exactly what happens with startups. When you are on a public blockchain and you have tokenized kind of incentives, this is how those networks are kind of bootstrapped across the Ethereum ecosystem. And when you kind of do it within sort of four banks, it's kind of between those four banks. I mean, those four banks would have collaborated anyways. Maybe it kind of brings in some level of authenticity, but it doesn't result in this tokenization, this kind of global incentive pools that are being built, and this kind of grassroots movement that comes with public blockchains, which any kind of permission blockchain is completely missing.
So I would also add to that, Kushal.
Sure.
I just want to add one more thing to that. So what Gautam is mentioning actually transforms users into almost investors. So if you are the early user of let's say an app built on the Ethereum chain, then you also become by tokenization, you also become kind of have a financial stake in the success of that platform. So to just draw an analogy, like those who were the early Twitter users when Twitter was sort of created in 2006, they were essentially, whether you were on Twitter or Facebook, all the value that was created by the early users accrued to the company, accrued to the shareholders of Twitter and Facebook. But in this sort of paradigm, what happens is the users also get a stake in the future success.
All right, but no, now I want to get into each and every potential, objection to cryptocurrency. Now, there's the standard cryptocurrency objection, which is called national security, but I don't want to deal with national security right now because that is the most obvious one of the objections. So, and Gautam, you can take this one to begin with. So I'll go with you first because this is a more technical sort of a thing, or I don't know. So I was interested reading an interesting article on Barry Weiss's Substack written by Michael Green, and one point stood out for me. So I'm going to ask you this. So the point Michael Green makes is he says money exists for one purpose, that is to cancel debt. So what his point was, he says Bitcoin is a speculative asset, like all assets, and requires systems of law and force to prevent it. And that's where they say it kind of runs into problems. And he says, which is why governments need to be very careful when it comes to Bitcoin. So I don't know if you've read Michael Green's objection on Barry Weiss's podcast, but what do you have to say to that objection?
Sorry, I didn't completely catch the specific objection, but from what I gathered is he said it kind of intervenes with the governments, and governments need to be careful is what I heard. The thing with Bitcoin is that no, as one said, no one really controls Bitcoin. It's a kind of a public blockchain, and you can only control the kind of access points to Bitcoin, right? So you can only control things like exchanges, which is kind of how money goes into kind of buying Bitcoin. But at the same time, if you just block the exchanges, people can still trade Bitcoin, person to person. So blocking Bitcoin is like banning Bitcoin is like banning almost like banning the internet, because people could still trade on a person to person basis. So it's very hard for whenever people ask for government intervention with Bitcoin and other things, it's very hard for most governments will eventually end up realizing that they cannot kind of control it. But what they can do is they can start to form rules around it. So like Raj was saying at some point, if you have capital controls, then you can kind of figure out how that capital controls will work around it. If you would like to kind of ensure that people are kind of the identity of people is kind of KYC or other kind of know your customer and other kind of important anti-money laundering, anti-security, secure kind of norms are followed. You could follow those kind of identification procedures at the point of when people are buying Bitcoin. But otherwise, just stopping Bitcoin or banning Bitcoin is almost infeasible, given the nature of the public blockchain.
All right. So, Rajeev, this was another point that I found very interesting in this entire process was that now people might say, so what would be their retort to this objection that I'm raising? But here's my next query. And I don't know what you feel about it. But so as of now, at least in the last week of April, so I'm reading you the exact quote from the article. In the last week of April, mining pools based in China accounted for roughly 90% of the processing power, which is called the hash rate in the Bitcoin network. Roughly 3 weeks ago, a power outrage in Xinjiang region of China resulted in a plunge in global Bitcoin processing. Bitcoin mining, the process of record keeping of the immutable chain of record on which the Bitcoin network depends, is dominated by entities and countries where the stated, obviously this article says the stated objective to harm the interest of the United States, but I'm going to take this to another direction. Now, the fact of the matter is that China, Russia, and Iran do play a disproportionately larger role when it comes to the mining of Bitcoin. Now, in such a scenario, from an Indian perspective, I'm coming to you from the Indian angle, right? So India should, don't you think India should be extremely careful when it comes to dealing with a technology like this, because we might end up inadvertently supporting China, which is obviously from a national security perspective and from a perspective of our stability, an actual threat to India?
No, so obviously, I don't think anybody's suggesting that, India should sort of plunge into this in some way in an irreversible fashion. Having said that, I mean, so how would India not banning Bitcoin support China? I don't see the connection there. So my case has always been that this should be taxed, this should be regulated. It should be treated like probably a financial asset, because I frankly see it like a financial asset. And what we need to do is evolve the regulatory mechanisms to basically regulate and tax this. And there are anything can be conflated into a national security risk, right? Like you can argue that some Indian sending out money through LRS, putting money into Alibaba stock is indirectly supporting CCP. You can make an argument like that, but is that really sort of that valuable or that important? And is it really damaging Indian national security? I don't know.
No, but national security angle is true, right, Rajeev? A lot of let's say if again the strength.
No, so I'm not suggesting. See, no, I don't think anyone is suggesting that start running like, let's say, the direct benefit transfer onto the Bitcoin network. No one is suggesting that, right? It's I think it's hard to draw a line between letting people participate in this and seeing that this is a national security threat to India.
I get what you're trying to say, but here's the thing: if somebody wants to sell the idea of Bitcoin to someone, the first thing they would object to is they will create a scenario where they'll say, well, because the beauty of the Bitcoin network is the decentralized nature, and the decentralized nature kind of creates that untraceability phenomena or the nature itself.
No, on the contrary, actually, you can trace, right? Because everything is on the public chain. Unlike cash, which is actually sort of anonymous. Someone sends you a envelope full of currency notes today, you don't know who sent it. But I think you can sort of see the entire chain of transactions, right, on the global public chain that is Bitcoin. I mean, Gautam can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it is actually more traceable. Now, who's behind the particular wallet or something may be a different question. But with cash, you just don't know. I mean, if someone drops off a bag of cash in front of your house, you can never tell where it came from.
I get it, but still, don't you think when I don't know how to say it, because I'm someone who's actually, I mean, I want to be openly, open and honest over here. I am not opposed to Bitcoin at a personal level. I'm not. But I'm just trying to think and do my level best and present the point, because everybody comes down to this, what if the terrorists use it angle. They just have that very specific point that is raised every time. And I know Balaji has taken this point on, Balaji Srinivasan has spoken about it many times. But the point is that is a legitimate concern. That what if it is taken over by
no, there is no doubt that for sure there is no doubt that the digital nature of the asset here, the digital and the free-flowing nature, means that it's much more easier to sort of transfer around, and that presents a difficult challenge. But this is like any new technology. So I would go with the approach of trying to regulate it. I think governments world over are wrestling with this challenge. It's not just India. I think you would find that the US government, many European governments, they're all sort of thinking about it, what to do with it. And so I just believe that it's worth keeping the door open, trying to think through rationally, instead of just shutting yourself out from something that is clearly going to be a novel, sort of valuable approach of sort of transferring value on the internet.
Okay, fair enough. So Gautam, I wanted to come to you now, and here's my question to you. So Rajeev just used the word regulation. Now, I was reading a very interesting article recently, and the point raised over there was that there is going to be eventual regulation done. I think we've lost Gautam. So Rajeev, I'm going to come to you while Gautam comes back. So I was just reading this article. In fact, I'll tell you where I read it. It was on CNBC. It was written by Ramesh Kailasham. He made an interesting point. He said crypto exchanges must ensure due diligence on tokens and projects around the robustness of the underlying blockchain code. A combination of regulation and self-regulation will be a key element to ensure further accountability and transparency. Now, to me, I'll try to draw analogies. I know they're not one-on-one and they're not the same case, but I'll give you a classic case of what's happening, let's say, with Facebook or any other company. You know what happens. So you have this classic case where Facebook, or for that matter, Twitter, or for that matter, any other company right now is going through a phase where who's going to be regulating them? Are they going to be regulated by the government in the case of governments across the world, or are they going to self-regulate? So what seems to be happening right now, at least in the United States of America, is the governments are very reluctant in regulating those tech giants. Now, in the case of cryptocurrency, where do you see this going? Is it going to be the case of more self-regulation? Because at least in the case of self-regulation, I find these big tech giants making a lot of mistakes and making a lot of inconsistent decisions where they seem to have inconsistent policies, where the policy is applied to X and doesn't seem to be applied to Y. Now, which route would you say be the best one when it comes to cryptocurrency? Should it start with a lot of self-regulation, as that article suggested, or it could go on to, let's say, a more robust way of government regulation?
So I was saying this is something where ultimately it's a financial kind of industry, right? Financial sector. So probably the case for self-regulation is not so prudent in my view. There should be more proactive involvement from the government. I think that actually will benefit the whole sector, and that would also require many agencies, many sort of regulatory authorities to show certain open-mindedness, because this is the uncharted territory actually in many ways. So if you rewind back a few hundred years to when the joint stock company was created. So the joint stock company that we take for granted today, that someone can become a shareholder in a business that someone else is running. I think it's that kind of a paradigm shift where it was absurd to put your money into an entity with someone else is controlling, because someone would say, why are you doing that? How do you know what the guy will do? But then obviously that joint stock structure, that formation of the company as we call it today, enabled all kinds of risk taking. It enabled all kinds of projects to get funded, which otherwise would not be fundable. And it's a similar kind of a shift where regulation is necessary for sort of broad participation and for ensuring that there's no damage done actually on a large scale.
So let's say if we are saying regulation again, I found this recommendation very interesting again from the same article. They say crypto assets should be treated like stock, and GST should be levied on the brokerage or exchange fees, but not on the transaction value. All individuals holding crypto assets must disclose their holdings in their income tax returns, like the existing Schedule AL at the end of the financial year. Appropriate FEMA regulations and HS codes should be applied for crypto asset purchases from outside India, and appropriate persons or entities should be allowed to import it and notify. What do you say about this?
That's not a reasonable approach. I think that's not. Exchanges should be regulated, right? So, there is no unregulated stock exchange that sort of is stable, and I think stability is necessary for this sector to grow, for participation to widen. So, something on the lines of what you just talked about, it may not be a bad way to begin thinking about it.
All right. So now, again, it comes down to this. There is this thing that's going around. I know you might say, oh, this is ridiculous, but is crypto a Ponzi scheme?
A Ponzi scheme, Ponzi scheme has a very specific meaning where, the scheme sustains itself by drawing in new investors, and the principle of the new investors is used to pay out the old investors, right? That's what a Ponzi scheme is. And over here, actually, all the activity that we see in the price sort of volatility in assets like Bitcoin and so on, I think that volatility comes from secondary market trading. So there are people who are buying and selling Bitcoins and essentially speculating in BTC and other kind of assets, and thus there is price volatility. I think that contributes probably significantly to that volatility. So in that sense, I don't really think that it's a Ponzi scheme as such. I mean, people can always argue whether gold has value. Is gold a Ponzi scheme? I don't think so. I mean, as Gautam also said, that analogy I think really holds, that BTC is particularly now being seen as a store of value. There are other chains, there are other sort of crypto assets that are coming up for different other applications, and they may not necessarily be used as a store of value to begin with. In fact, the Ethereum sort of blockchain came up as a result of Bitcoin transforming itself into a value store. And Ethereum was then, the creator of Ethereum, Vitalik Buterin. He sort of came up with this because, those who were trying to sort of, let's say, develop decentralized applications, what are called D-apps, were not able to do so on the Bitcoin chain anymore. So I mean, see, what gets the maximum media attention is, Bitcoin crashed 30%, Dogecoin is up 200%. But this is a very, large world. There are a lot of things happening in it. I think engaging in a serious and thoughtful way with this technology is necessary. I certainly think it is here to stay, and it is going to make a big impact, particularly in fields like finance.
All right. So another interesting thing that had happened recently was, obviously, I mean, I don't understand this subject at all. That's why I'm more intrigued by it. So the value of Bitcoin went like this when Elon Musk said, "I like it." Then suddenly Elon said, "I don't like it." And then it goes down like this. Now, the point is not whether Elon said, "I like it" or "I don't like it." The point was, why did Elon back off? Now, but this is a factual point, right? That, Bitcoin consumes a lot of energy. The Bitcoin mining process is a very energy consuming process. Now, there's some people have said that the energy level required for mining Bitcoin has now reached the equivalent level of the amount of power that would be needed in the entire country, say like Sweden. Now, which is why, folks like, let's say, Elon said, okay, this is not my thing. Now, I did say I'll accept Bitcoin, but since this has been shown to me, I'm not a Bitcoin bro, as they say. So he went off the bogey. So what do you think is a possible solution to this energy consumption argument?
No, so that is a legitimate concern, obviously. So for example, now with Ethereum, so the reason Bitcoin mining is so energy intensive is it employs this method, this cryptographic method, which is what's called proof of work. So you have to perform some computational sort of energy intensive computation to establish that you earn the coin, you mine the coin. So that is why, that's because of the computational intensity. There is the energy intensity. There is the heavy energy use. Now, basically, to address that issue with Ethereum, for example, Ethereum is now moving from a proof of work to a proof of stake approach. So, I mean, I don't want to get into too much technicality here, but that in some ways would address the sort of energy question. It is a valid question.
So how does that? So can you explain this difference between proof of work to the other part?
No, so proof of stake validates the transactions differently. I mean, I don't know how to sort of say it without using jargon, and then you go down a jargon rabbit hole. But essentially, okay, let me put it this way. So proof of work, which was like the original sort of consensus mechanism with blockchain, and it was used to confirm sort of the whether a transaction had happened and the new blocks would be added to the chain. That was an energy intensive way, and proof of stake basically changes that by sort of the duplication actually on the network, which is doing the sort of transaction, or the nodes on the network are reduced.
Okay, fine. So this would be like, it's good. So somebody has made a very good point. So you need GPUs and ASIC to mine proof of work. You don't need such systems for proof of stake. Yeah, so good. So we have a live viewer who has kind of explained it beautifully.
So then the energy intensity reduces, and then whoever is mining with a proof of stake approach, that person is limited to sort of mining the scale of transactions that is reflective to how much of the ownership stake you have.
All right, so got it.
So
now
I mean,
in
a way there is a trade-off here. No, 1 second, there is a trade-off here actually. So the security of that proof of stake approach is slightly lower than the proof of work approach, right? But in a way, the energy intensity is reduced.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So now let me get into another phase. So this is what I have always understood. So for me, and I don't know if I'm getting this correctly or not, because see, I don't get this subject very well. You have been following it far more than I do. So let me tell me if I'm getting this wrong. I am not so obsessed with Bitcoin. I am obsessed with the technology, blockchain as a technology itself, and the way it could be used in other areas in life, other areas of governance, other areas of maybe, let's say, disrupting big tech. Could, let's say, technology that has come out of, say, crypto and Bitcoin be used in some sort of disruption of big tech? Because I don't want to be people should not come up and say Kushal is obsessed with bashing crypto. So I also want to see the good side in it.
Actually, so that is one of the most high potential sort of areas where I think a lot of interest is there in addressing the monopoly power, the platform power of the big tech players. So I think we are in early stages, but a lot of smart people are getting behind this. A lot of smart engineers, a lot of smart money is getting behind this idea that the only way to take out the sort of monopoly power of large platforms is by building decentralized applications on the chain. And let me give you something more concrete as well, actually, Kushal. So because we are both in India, we all know how difficult it is to sort of enforce contracts in India, right? Mm-hmm. So let me paint certain kind of blue sky scenario of how this could help India in particular. So when it comes to contract enforcement, let's say you get into a contract with a vendor, or you are sort of working with a company who's empaneled you as a vendor for a particular task, and then comes the time to pay after the task is completed, and the guy is not paying up, right? So what do? Your options are: you go to court, you go through the lower court system, you try to enforce your rights, and you try to extract the payment from the person who's supposed to pay you. Mm-hmm. But as we all know, that is a slow, time-consuming, unreliable process in India, right? Because of just the sheer lack of judicial capacity. So can you kind of put this kind of agreement into a smart contract format where, like Gautam was explaining, it's an if-then system. Once a particular task is done, then the payment is released. And there is no space to sort of play those kind of games where somebody withholds a payment and then it gets into a legal dispute, burdening the already overburdened legal system in the country. So this is one of the potential sort of blue sky applications that could be valuable for a country like India, and I believe many other countries in the developing world where contract enforcement is an issue.
Yeah, I, I can't control my laughter, but I don't know why I find this funny.
I know,
This is
I
actually
know. No.
I
You know,
no, no, no. So,
I've actually written about this, and when I say this, I know people laugh at me, but I do think that I do think it is possible.
yeah, but this comment by a viewer is kind of very interesting. He says, I think government of India will mandate Aadhaar backed crypto. That's actually so true.
So that is one way to if you link it, if the way PAN cards are now linked to
Yeah.
Aadhaar cards, right? So if you want to do a certain type of KYC, like know your customer, so just to know who all are trading in crypto, who all are holding crypto, so you regulate the exchanges, you tie the identity of the individual to a certain government issued ID like the Aadhaar or whatever, and then you can know, right, like this person has traded so much, so then you can kind of regulate and tax the activity.
Yeah, you could, but again, the problem is that now the good thing and the bad thing in crypto is that there is no one sole owner, right? It is a decentralized system, so nobody really has ownership of this thing. But then, Rajeev, again,
No, but you can own. See, no. 1 second. There's a slight confusion here. So there's the Bitcoin network, which we call Bitcoin. There's the asset, right? Which we should call BTC, just to be clear, because even the Bitcoin asset is called Bitcoin, and the network is also called Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So you can own BTCs in your wallet. That ownership aspect is pretty clear.
Yeah, but let me tell you where I was coming. So think like because we're on India, think like a bureaucrat sitting in Delhi or in any corner of India. So the classic impulse of a bureaucrat is, I want to control it. The thing about Bitcoin is it is not controllable. And the rule in India is one that is not controllable should not be allowed. Because the moment it is not controllable, we cannot manage it, we cannot regulate it. If we cannot manage it and we cannot regulate it, we lose our grip and we don't know where it goes. And that's why the resistance from the Babudam will come again. So how do we tell them there is a difference between you not being able to control it and there being absolute chaos?
No, so control what, right? Like, can we get more precise about that? What are we trying to control exactly?
Well, we are trying to control the nature of the asset itself. Where look, at the end of the day, currency, right?
Does the
currency?
No, 1 second. So, does the government try to control a particular company's value?
The government does
The
not.
government but does the government try to control the price of gold? Does the government try to control a barrel of crude oil? I mean, these are all things which are beyond the government's control, right? So, in the same way, this is also the price of the particular digital asset is not in the government's control. It will never be, just like any other sort of traded commodity.
All right, then what happens in that case? That because I know this might happen, because I see this, in a babu's mind going, "Iska kya kare?" So iska ye solution hai. So what if somebody in the Delhi corridors of power says, "We like crypto, we will launch our own cryptocurrency"? Then what happens?
By all means, I think India should launch a central bank digital currency, as indeed many governments are contemplating, including Japan, the United States, the European Central Bank, in the EU. So they're all contemplating launching a CBDC, and India should too. But see, we should understand that this is not a zero-sum game. Just because Ethereum and Bitcoin exist doesn't mean that other cryptocurrencies can't exist.
I get it. The challenge is going to be explaining this to a bureaucrat, Rajeev. That is the problem.
No, so which is where I think you have to come into it with a beginner's mind. You have to come into it with certain intellectual humility that this is a new area, and you have to spend some time in understanding what this is and how it can help the country, which I do think it can help the country. I mean, we have entrepreneurs. India has some brilliant coders and technologists who are working in the space. So India should support them.
Okay, so okay, then again, I'll ask you this counter again. Then tell me how it helps the country.
I just gave you an example. Can you have a smart contract system in India for many kinds of business to business transactions, for many kinds of business to consumer transactions? Can you have a smart contract system? Can we reduce the load on the lower judiciary?
That's fair. So you're saying Bitcoin becomes some sort of an arbitrator, where a lot of
No, not
arbitration that
Bitcoin.
is
I mean, let's not you say Bitcoin. I would say blockchains.
blockchain. Sorry,
You know,
I'll use the correct word.
smart contracts that are on chain, can they be used to ease the burden, especially on lower courts in India?
I wouldn't mind happening in the
So
Supreme
I'm
Court also.
so
I'm just kidding.
I'm not a a technologist or a developer in this case, but just looking at at a very high level, I think this can happen, and in fact, someone should make it happen.
Fair enough. Okay, now let me start taking a few questions and then we can wrap it up. So somebody has asked, is money a unit of energy or time or both? So what is your view?
I don't know how to answer that. That doesn't seem to make that much sense to me, to be honest.
Okay, so okay, then if I was to tell you what part of it doesn't make sense to you?
I mean, a unit of, I mean, money can help you buy time, right? I don't know what else to say. Money can sort of create time for you if you spend it in a judicious way.
All right. Yeah, I mean, if somebody was to ask me this, is money a unit of energy or time or both, I would say money is a useful fiction agreed upon by Homo sapiens to live some sort of a life. There you go. There's your answer. I think money is a fictional, notional concept that we've created. So it ends there. It doesn't matter if it's a unit of energy or a unit of time. It is just a fictional entity that we've created. Now, there were a few questions that I had received on email. Again, most of them because I had asked a few of my friends about this, and the only thing that seems to be coming every single time to me from most of the viewers of the podcast was that what if terrorists use it? What if terrorists use it? I don't know why, but they keep on using everybody.
No. I mean, there's no doubting that, and as I said, the digital nature, the easy to transfer nature. I mean, it can be used for good, it can be used for bad, like any technology. Which is why I believe regulation is important.
Yeah, look, my answer to each and every person was terrorists also use cash. Are you going to ban cash? I mean,
Absolutely,
it's a
they
very
do.
simple answer.
I mean, Maoists are not using credit cards, right? Maoists are using cash.
Yeah, so we don't ban cash, right? We have to live with it. So I get the answer, but then what does it say to the psychology of the person that, again, I bring you back to the Babu's mentality. The Babu is a human being. The Babu is also going to think like that, which is where it's a huge
that is
problem.
valid. That is, yeah, it is a challenge, which is why, like I said, regulators have to come at it certain open-mindedness. I think it's just human nature to sort of be fearful of something that is new. The first reaction is, what the hell is this? Like, I don't want to deal with it, right? When you see something novel, and frankly, regulators in particular have that mindset, and especially in the financial space, Indian regulators have always been erring on the side of caution. Their first instinct is to protect, to sort of ring fence like small investors, ring fence sort of depositors, and rightfully so. My view is that we've always overreached on that front to the detriment of the larger economy. So when you try to spot out each and every kind of misconduct, where you go for zero defect, so to say, then you also lose something in the process.
We do, but then again, it's like, for me, the unrelenting feature of this entire crypto or Bitcoin or whatever you want, a blockchain discussion has been, it is on one side you have technologists. So again, this is my follow-up question to you. On one side, you have technologists who have built this thing, right? These people are technically qualified. They understand their game. They will use technical jargons, and they think, what's the problem? It's so clear. Like, I'll give you an example. I'll give you a good parallel example. Nuclear energy and nuclear power, right? Nuclear power, if we look at the data, we look at papers, we look at it in a very dispassionate way, we know the greenest form of energy available today on planet Earth, if we look at it from a holistic perspective, is nuclear energy. The moment you present it, and it's very funny that, usually clean energy is a thing of the left, but the one thing hated the most by a significant portion of the left is nuclear power. The moment you talk about nuclear power, all that goes into the mind of the other side, that is not technically qualified, that is not into that field, that is not into the nitty-gritties of the subject itself, is Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, or Fukushima. And then they have this photo of the atomic bomb blasting. And who was that guy who said, who recited the Bhagavad Gita, who came up with the atomic bomb? Today,
J. Robert Oppenheimer.
Yeah, Oppenheimer. And then he was reciting the Bhagavad Gita. This is what happens on the other side. This is somehow what I have noticed in my entire understanding of the discussion on cryptocurrencies, bitcoins, blockchain. On the one side, you have these tech-savvy entrepreneurs across the world, just like the nuclear, pro-nuclear guys. They are going on, oh, Bitcoin is amazing, Bitcoin is this, Bitcoin is that. And on the other side are clueless people looking at this and saying, ye humko maar dalenge. This is what is happening. And the gap is so huge.
See the problem, sort of or the challenge of something new like blockchains and crypto assets is that, you have to look at it from all lenses of law, economics, software, even international relations, and there are many facets to it. And each sort of each specialist in that particular area looks at it from their perspective without looking at the bigger picture. And they also tend to sort of assume the worst possible in that particular field, right? So like like the international relations or foreign policy expert can say, this is going to be used for terrorism, or this is going to be used for nefarious purposes by extra national actors or whatever. And then the economist will say, what are central banks going to do? And this is a kind of attack on the privilege of the sovereign, that only states can issue currencies, and here you have private people issuing currencies, private entities issuing currencies. So every entity kind of looks at it from their lens and assumes the worst. But I think what is important is taking a sort of holistic view and an interdisciplinary view of what this enables, of what this can be used for. And most often people will say, but what is it being used for? There's no use for it. There's just like rampant speculation and hype. But I would submit that is the nature of all new technologies. You need to give people the space to experiment and try to create applications. So if you just enter a kind of research lab and say, what is this used for? What is this used for? You can dismiss a lot of things in a lab like that. And frankly, we are in the early stages of this. This is not fully developed. This is not fully evolved yet, which is why it is such a great opportunity for entrepreneurs and technologists.
Okay, so just one more thing that I wanted to know your view on, and then I'll ask one more question from the live viewers too. Do you think in this entire debate on blockchain, crypto, or any related subject, do you think somewhere down the line the technology creators have maybe failed in any way to maybe communicate better?
No, I think if you follow what they are saying, like if you follow their own writings, if you follow some of these pioneers on their blogs, on Twitter, and so on, I mean, they are saying all the right things. but just the media narrative is such that I was drawing a comparison between people have been talking about Dogecoin, right? So Dogecoin's been going up in price and sucking up all the attention. So I was saying, someone asked me that look at Dogecoin, what is this absurd sort of thing happening there? So I said, do you think Salman Khan represents Indian cinema? Are you going to sort of dismiss all Indian cinema because of let's say Salman Khan and his output? I mean, there's a lot going on here, right? So why look at the most frankly lame thing happening in the entire ecosystem and just saying that everything is crap because of this one particular thing? So engaging in a serious way, engaging in a humble way with this is necessary. I think it's a revolutionary technology for many reasons. I mean, some of them I've already gone over in the last 1 hour. And when people keep saying what is it used for, well, please give it some time.
Fair enough. You could say please give it some time, and I'll give you a very honest answer. I think I got exposed to crypto literally because of you. मुझे कुछ पता नहीं था. I saw you sharing articles on it and talking about it, and then I got intrigued, and then me being me, I started reading more, and then I kept on reading and listening to a few podcasts, and then obviously Balaji, I've been reading Balaji very regularly, and this is my honest input to the pro crypto side as someone who's actually sympathetic to the technology and who's very intrigued by it, is that I think the communication needs to be a little bit better. I think sometimes the explanations are too technical. I think there is too much technology jargon. People like
but Kushal, that's but that is the challenge, right? So how do you talk about this without using jargon? I mean, it's very hard to sort of de-jargonize. I mean, one can try to make analogies, but ultimately someone has to do the work of engagement. I mean, you can de-jargonize it up to a point, but it is the same with all new technologies. When the internet came along 25 years ago, then if you had to talk about the internet, you had to use certain kinds of jargon, and over time those kind of technical words get normalized in the discourse, and we don't think of them as jargon anymore. So it's just one of those things where those who are trying to build will sort of obviously have an incentive to learn, and even those who are, let's say, trying to use or engage with this, there are certain things that one would need to learn.
All right, so I'll just take this last
which is why I think what happens is the people who are sort of drawn into it are the curious ones, that what is happening here, let's try to figure out what is going on. And those who are the less curious ones, or they tend to be dismissive that this is all nonsense and it's going to end soon or whatever.
All right,
either it's that, or it's people who are looking at it from their own specialist lens without looking at it from a slightly holistic perspective.
All right, so one last question, Rajeev, and we'll wrap it up. So Anirudh has asked, as we know, crypto's main advantage is it gives finite supply of an asset class, but now we have a finite supply of infinite different cryptos. So does this challenge its core belief and value?
So no, I don't think that was the initial. I would challenge that question a little bit. So there are many different types of crypto assets, right? So as Gautam was mentioning, there are different types of tokens that anyone can issue. I mean, a token is essentially kind of a property share almost in a particular application, right? So it is, like I said, like you're a user and you're also an investor. Think of it like that. As sort of this kind of gets more pervasive, maybe you will see more and more assets, and there's nothing wrong with that.
All right, so time to wrap it up. But before I wrap things up, so any closing comments that you want to make, go for it, Rajeev.
No, so I would just say that it makes sense to sort of engage with it, like I said, in an open-minded way. Yes, there are challenges and risks associated with this, like with any new technology, and that requires prudent regulation.
All right.
And the bigger point to understand here, Kushal, and this is where sort of I differ with many of my very smart friends who think otherwise, is that if you look at the history of the state, the state is an entity which is, the state or government. Uh, like if you look at the history of that entity over centuries, you will find that the state evolves in response to technology. The state is not a static kind of a structure, right? So today we take democracy for granted. The one person, one vote system. I mean, even one person, one vote wasn't so common in the world a century ago. If you go back further, if you go back a few more 100 years, even democracy was not common. There was a monarchic system that was far more common. There were like royal families. There was divine right to rule. But then, why did we make the shift from that kind of a top-down approach to a participative democratic system? Well, it had to do with changes in communications technology. It had to do with changes in transportation technology. So it is ultimately technology which shapes the nature of government. It sort of affects the nature of the state. And the internet has changed the state in so many ways in the last 20 years, right? So 25 years ago, if some event happened in one corner of India, you would not read about it until the next day in the newspaper or magazine or something, right? Now you are instantly seeing images of it, videos of it, people are commenting on it live, and thus the expectation of responsiveness from government also changes. If people know what is going on, they expect the government to respond in a certain way. They expect the leaders to be engaged in a certain way. People expect more and more information from the state, and they expect leaders who are more and more responsive, which was not the case probably 25 years ago. I mean, imagine how much you could hide when no one has the internet and there's hardly any television, right? So now pervasive sort of ubiquitous communications technology, easy transportation has really changed things in India. I'm talking about India in particular, not just because we live here, because we've seen this change in our lifetimes, right?
Absolutely.
So once again, something new comes along, and that will somewhere, I think it will change the nature of the state.
I agree. I understand, and I think like any new concept out there, this is just the nature of how the cookie crumbles. In human nature, some people are going to be curious, some people are going to be fearful, some people are going to be,
Absolutely.
hands-on or hands-off, and that's just how it's going to be with crypto or blockchain or Bitcoin, whatever it is. I'm agnostic to it, but I'm definitely on the curious side of it, with a little bit of sympathy to the arguments made by the people who are pro crypto. So it is what it is. Also, before we wrap things up, I just want to make this very clear. We're all speaking here in our individual capacity. Especially, I am not sponsored by any cryptocurrency. So just before someone thinks Kushal ko koi sponsor kar raha hai, bhaiya humko koi sponsor nahi kar raha. I'm just a guy who's curious about it, and I genuinely find it intriguing. I just find it very intriguing as to what is happening, and I always think about cryptocurrency or anything from a philosophical perspective. So my interest was only there. No, and Rajeev is also speaking on an individual basis, and so was Gautam. And I apologize, we could not fix Gautam's internet, so he had to leave the chat. Maybe so somewhere down the line in the future, I'll get Gautam again on the chat. But Rajeev, thanks a lot for coming on the podcast. You've always been kind enough to come and explain things in detail to all the listeners over here. So once again, thank you very much, brother.
No, thanks, Kushal. Always fun to chat with you.
All right, guys, time to wrap it up. If you like the podcast, please subscribe to the channel, share the video, leave your comment, support the Cārvāka podcast by becoming a subscriber on Patreon or on YouTube. You can send direct donations on UPI or buy the Cārvāka podcast merch on kushalmehra.com or kadakmerch.com. I'll see you next time. Until then, namaste. Take care. Goodbye.